Hey everyone, Nick Smith here from the team at Visier, and I'm here with Yan Chen to answer the question, how can we trust the information and validate the information with the Visier? Let's take a look now under the covers of Visier Cloud to understand how we model the data and how we can trust where that information is coming from. Yan, over to you.
Behind the scenes is taking care of a lot of the things that you would normally manually do in other systems. So it's receiving that file behind the scenes, it's putting it into the appropriate location, it's creating this container to house all that data. And on top of that, what it's going to do is it's going to go through that final step, which is it's going to map the information that you sent me to the analytical objects structure, meaning the employee definition that you've described for the application, and it's going to map all that together for me so that I don't need to do any of that legwork.
Right.
It's
So that's where the automation comes in. There's
correct.
lots
Yeah,
of automation that's happening there behind the
exactly.
scenes.
Yeah. So let's just what it produced for me was this. So let's go and look at each individual bit. So I'm going to save this project because it is actually capturing all the things that I'm doing. For the load itself so that I have a historical record and I can make adjustments as I need. So in this case, what it did was, here's the file that I uploaded, and it was successfully received. And what it did was actually created a source because I didn't have one, and it loaded it into this source. So here's the same records that I got from that upload. It contains all the information that I need for telling the system what each employee record needs to look like. If I go back into the project that I was in, I can then also look at that mapping that it created, which is the relationship between the source data to the analytical object. So in here, it's telling me that for every single attribute that is described for what the employee needs, such as their active assignments, their ages, their annual pay, those are already provided in this file. Some are mandatory fields like the event date and the employee, but some are optional. So this is stuff that I've loaded, such as, let's see, the job family that they belong in. So I can inspect this, and it's done this mapping, and it's also showing me some examples of the records that are already being loaded. So I know that I've mapped it to the right columns themselves. And to help the user out, it's also showing a distribution of what are the most likely classifications for job family, for example, so that I know that the information I'm providing is relatively in this same shape because we have more specialists 2 than 4s in the company. And I know that there's about 2,163 in there. So it gives me confidence that the data that you're receiving is correct and that the data that I sent to you is also in that correct shape that I expect for the number of employees in that job family, for example. And because this will translate directly into the analysis that it will generate later on when a consumer looks at employees by job family, for example.
Right.
Okay, so
Okay.
that's one bit that we can help our data onboarding team look at that data before it's even generated. They can inspect all this data, and we provide some stats for them already. Right? So in order to actually see that in the consumer space, so let me go back to the guided on board and go back to that same topic. So this is the one that's I just loaded and mapped. Now I can just generate this data version. This data version is the in-memory cube technology that we have that puts all of the sources that you're sending us, and it does all this transformation with all the rules that are specified, all the mappings that are declared, and it stores this as a consumable cube, essentially, that allows a user to traverse through all of this rich data that they sent to us. So this is the thing of, we are identifying certain things to point out to the user when they're loading data. We have 2 things, errors, warnings. We don't really have info yet, but we're building that in. So let's take a look at the issues that generates from this data version. So what we're doing is the application designers have already specified that if you start loading data into the system, there's things that you should do validation checks on. So if you load the employee file into the analytical object of employee, the first thing that you should probably check is your headcount correct? So in these cases, what we're identifying is certain things that a user should go in and check if their metric is correct. For example, this
Right.
employee count, right? So in here, we're leading the user now into taking some actions that says, I want to view the issue in this case. And it says, in this analytical object, there was more data added to employee that you should probably look at the employee count of that employee so they can visualize this employee count, which really translates to head count. It's like, okay, did that piece of data that I load into the system translate into a head count? So in this case, is this the trend of head count that I expected for the file that I just uploaded to your system? So if I say yes, then that's great, because now I can mark this as a resolved issue, and I can go down the list of, I did also create some new dimensionality with that file, top talent, previous pay, employment type. I can visualize all this, and this is really just a checklist that we're providing. Is like, are these the right employment types with the right number of people in each employment type, as a way for them to scan that data and look for that, look for any anomalies, right? So in that case, that's all fine. So that these 108 issues that I think are fine, I can mark these as resolved now. So that is gone from an unchecked state to a checked state. So I know that I'm going through my checklist, or the system's helping me go through a checklist to make sure that all the data I put into your system is correct. But there's other cases where, if it is changes over time, so like, we don't expect headcount to stay constant over time. What we want to do is allow them to set thresholds as to identify when does it cross a certain plus or minus threshold, so that the system can help them identify that there's anomalies. Maybe there's an extra file that was loaded that shouldn't have been loaded, and it caused their headcount to spike above, in this case, 5%. So we're looking for a condition that says, did your headcount go above 5% from the last period? So the system's automatically doing this check for them, or they could specify their own checks if they choose. So if they know that they have a tighter bound and it's 2%, they don't want our 5% out of the box, they can change that to 2% range that they want to check for. Or if they're a fast growing company and they grow by 15% month over month, then they'll change that bound to 15%. So whatever suits their company's growth rate is what we're letting them customize, and ultimately the system is running behind the scenes doing this check for them.
Thanks, Yan, from our solutions team for that demo. And we want to hear from you. What kind of questions do you have? Hashtag Ask Visier, or drop your questions into the comments below. And we want to hear how you are using data and analytics. Looking forward to speaking with you soon.